Greetings YouTube, welcome back to the Meta channel. I am Marcus, bringing you another video for Cardfight Vanguard something dress. In this video, we will be going through one of the new right lines that will be introduced within DBT08, and that right line being Shojodoji, if I'm pronouncing the name right. So Shojodoji is meant to be like the Murakumo version of Dragon Empire for D series. Maybe Nubatama, but then again Nubatama is more towards like ninja dragons as opposed to you know ninja demons, ninja beasts, or that sort of stuff. But then this right line does resemble some of the playstyle from Nubatama, so I'm not really sure which faction does right line actually belongs to. If you do know that, let me know down in the comment section. Without further ado, let's take a look at what the new right line does. First off, we have Sakura Romance Stealth Rogue Shojodoji. Although when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, look at the top 5 cards from your deck, choose up to 2 normal units with stealth in their card names. From among them, reveal them, put one of the revealed cards into your soul, bind the rest of the revealed card, and shuffle your deck. Second skill, Active Bind Zone. If you have a grade 1 or greater Vanguard with stealth in its card name, cost Soul Blast 1 and call this card to Vanguard Circle. So this basically helps you filters out your deck, while at the same time does sets up your bind zone, because we have, for example, himself is able to call himself from the bind zone if he is in the bind zone, that is. Being able to call himself from the bind zone actually lets you have a very heavy aggression from the start if you do manage to get another copy of himself from the top 5 and put it into the bind zone. And with one Soul Blast, and if you're going second, yeah, you can basically have an extra Vanguard attack. Very neat little combo, if I do say so myself. But then again, that still needs to see if you can get this grade 1 in the top 5 cards of your deck, which I think is possible, if you ask me. And of course, since this combo is a viable combo for Shojodoji to play, I guess you could be running more of himself within the main deck, which I think is gonna be really nice combo to see and could potentially catch your opponent off guard. Well, now that most of you will be seeing this video, I guess it's no longer really a surprise anymore. For the grade 2, World Shaper Stealth Rogue Shojodoji. Although when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, look at the top 5 cards from your deck, choose up to 2 normal units with stealth in its card name from among them, reveal them, put one of the reveal cards into your soul, call the rest of the reveal cards to Vanguard Circle, and shuffle your deck. Second skill, Active Bind Zone. If you have a grade 2 or greater Vanguard with stealth in its card name, cost Soul Blast 1 and call this card to Vanguard Circle. So this is basically quite similar to the grade 1 Shojodoji. Instead of putting one to the Bind Zone, you now call one of those 2 cards to the Vanguard Circle, which in turns basically tells you that this deck is gonna be super heavy aggression right from the start, provided if you do get, you know, the right cards to the bind zone, that is. And of course, this card does Superior Call 1, which is actually super nice. And not to mention, this card does have a similar skill to the grade 1, which in the bind zone you basically could call himself to the, you know, Vanguard Circle, which is super nice. So what this basically tells us that this right line encourages you to basically go heavy on the offense. This is basically a rush beatdown deck if you do have those right units to call. And since you will be using quite a bit of soul to maintain that aggression, you might want to run cards that basically move to soul. A very good example here is of course that grade 1 that basically goes to soul whenever you discard during your turn. That card is going to be super great. What's more, he's a stealth unit as well, so yeah, that card could potentially give you more value in terms of, you know, you do need to discard to write from the right deck anyway. So it's a very nice card. I think you should be getting it if you want to play this card. Very nice card, if you ask me. Next is the big boss, Peak Personage Stealth Rogue Shojodoji, if I didn't pronounce that wrong. Active Vanguard Circle. Once per turn, cost bind 2 cards with stealth in its card name from soul. Choose 2 of your opponent's Vanguard Circle. Bind all of the cards on the chosen Vanguard Circle, and your opponent put those cards into their hand at the end of that turn. Second skill, Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks a Vanguard, cost Counter Blast 1 and put 2 Vanguards into your soul. Choose a card with stealth in its card name from your bind zone, call it to Vanguard Circle, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, that call unit gets 10k power until the end of turn. That's a very long skill, despite this is only like a 2-skill card. With this boss unit, you're basically making 4 attacks every single turn because, you know, the second skill does call 1 stealth unit from your bind zone out to your rearguard circle. And what's more, it also gets a 10k provided if your opponent is a grade 3. Not only that, the first skill actually helps you set up your own bind zone as well as removing your opponent's interceptor, which is actually very, very nice. And considering some matchup does not appreciate you binding their stuff, for example, Virina, yeah, that's a very, very detrimental skill to counter. But since most of those cards aren't gonna go back to hand, it's not really that great. But that's not all. As we progress to see the rest of the support, you will see that it's starting to get a bit of a problem for, you know, Virinas as well as some other decks, which I will mention later. This particular boss unit, I think, will require you to basically have a little bit more brain thinking. I mean, it does requires you to think a little bit more than certain decks because this right line is not really that straightforward. You will need to plan ahead because this card does, you know, put 2 rearguards to soul as well as bind all of your stuff from the soul. It allows you to basically recycle some of your resources because we do have quite a bit of them within Dragon Empire. If you accidentally missed a step or forgot a step or, you know, messed up one of your steps, it's gonna severely hinder your power level a little bit because this card by himself does not really gain a power boost. As you can see, there's no really like gain a power but to himself, which means that the Vanguard attack is gonna be the weakest one out of all of the attacks that you're gonna make with this right deck. But the rearguard is not something you should be scoffing at because the rearguard is actually super disgusting once we get into some of the main attacker that this right line actually has. So if you do want to get this deck, I would suggest you playtest this card heavily. Even without an opponent, you should be able to, you know, practice to just to like brainstorm a little bit on how the combo should be because, you know, this is a tricky deck to play in my opinion. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at some of the other stealth units that you could basically take advantage of if you're planning to get this Shojodoji deck. First up is the Triple R Stealth Dragon Unpreceden. Although when this unit is placed on rearguard circle by your card's ability, if you have a Vanguard with Tamayura or Shojodoji in its card name, cast Soul Blast 1 and draw a card. Second skill, continuous rearguard circle. If 2 or more of your cards were put from rearguard into your soul this turn, this unit gets 10k power. This card is basically one of those hybrid cards that actually supports 2 right line by himself. The first one we actually do see in the Monster Girl, our Archite, where, you know, it's a Soul Blast 2 to draw 1 if the Vanguard is, you know, Eva or Archite, but I don't really remember what the requirement to basically play the cost is. But yeah, Soul Blast 1 to draw a card is nice, but the problem here is that this deck, I do foresaw that it will have a soul issue. Most of your soul will be used to either call units from your bind zone or maybe this card. So, but at the same time, you do need your soul to be bind to the bind zone in order to activate skills, especially the Grade 3 Shojodoji as we see previously. You do need to plan ahead on how much resources you're gonna use, and at the same time, you do not want to basically minimize your attacking turn because Vanguard is not a game where, you know, you attack like half-heartedly and allow your opponent to survive. Chances are you're gonna die the next turn. Drawing 1 is nice for a Soul Blast, but as mentioned before, I think you will probably need a lot to run cards that basically gives you soul. Otherwise, you're gonna severely lack for soul. The negative parts aside, this card is probably going to be one of the best Shojodoji's attacker. By himself, he's going to be at 23k, and with the power boost from the Grade 3 Shojodoji, it's a 33k. With Personage, it's a 43. It's a very, very good attacker. Very nice. And I think you would want to bind this in the bind zone anyway, so I guess it's an okay card, with the exception of maybe the Soul Blast 1 to draw 1. Yeah, that's gonna be a little bit of problem, but if you do manage your resources well, I guess it's fine. Next up, we have Stealth Dragon Jakumetsu Arcs. Although when this unit is placed on rearguard circle from bind zone, this unit gets 5k power until the end of turn. Auto rearguard circle. When this unit attacks, cast Soul Blast 1, choose a card from your opponent's bind zone and put it at the bottom of their deck. So this is another attacker, a 15k attacker, provided you superior call him from the bind zone to rearguard circle. Other than that, he's just gonna be a 10k attacker. Not gonna be as good, but you know, having a 5k to call from the bind zone, and alongside the 10k from grade 3, I guess this is a 25k, but then again, it's okay, I would say. However, the main selling point of this card is the second skill. You do not need to call this card from the bind zone in order to get the second skill. You just attack, pay the Soul Blast 1 to choose a opponent's card in the bind zone to put it at the bottom of the deck. Now, this skill is actually really good if your matchup is like, for example, Virina as well as Zorga. So the best example that you would want to put at the bottom of their deck is gonna be these two units. Well, maybe not so much for Trickstar, but Trickstar is the beginning of, you know, Virina's evolution, so it's actually not a bad card to put at the bottom of their deck. And of course, Roaming Prison Dragon. Yeah, Zorga always wants Roaming Prison Dragon to be at the drop zone, and most of the time he's gonna stay on the rear guard to, you know, wait for them to use the order card to sacrifice 2 to draw 1 and countercharge. Yeah, these two cards are best example of what you want to bind as well as return them to the bottom of the deck with this card. It's actually a very detrimental strategy to go against these two decks. Not so much for the other right line, because they don't really like hurt a whole lot for their cards being sent to bottom, but hey, there are possibilities. I just maybe didn't thought about it yet. So this card, I think it's a worthy double R. It's such a good card, with the exception, you know, once again, the Soul Blast one. So you do need to be careful on your soul usage. Otherwise, yeah, you're gonna hungry for soul. Next is the great one, Stealth Fiend Koumaaun. Auto, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle from hand, cost Counter Blast 1, choose a card from your opponent's bind zone, and you may put it at the bottom of your deck. If you did not put a card, choose up to 1 unit card with Stealth in its card name and grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from your bind zone and call it to rearguard circle. This is another return something to the bottom from their bind zone card, and I think this is one of the most important pieces for Shojodoji. Why do I think that? Is that first off, it's not using Soul Blast, it's using Counter Blast, which is, in my eyes, is really good. The previous skill up until now, with the exception of the grade 3, does use 1 Counter Blast. Each and every card uses 1 Soul Blast. So yeah, it's, you know, a bit of a problem there. So you can either choose to put your opponent's card to the bottom of your deck, or, you know, call something out from the bind zone. It's actually very nice, and, you know, for the utility of this card provides to Shojodoji, as well as, you know, for that cost, only Counter Blast 1. Yeah, it's very good. And this card basically makes the bind zone to be like your second hand to increase consistency of what units you would want for your combo pieces. It's actually very nice that they actually gave Shojodoji this card. But then again, keep in mind here is that this card can only activate its skill when it is called from your hand. If you call this card from the bind zone, it does not activate the skill. Thankfully, we actually have a card that actually can combo with this card, which is the next card. Return to the Afterlife. This is a order card. Once again, it's restricted to Shojodoji, which is actually very good. You and your opponent each choose one of your own rearguard circle, bind all of the cards on the chosen rearguard circle, and at the end of that turn, each player put the cards bound with this effect into their hand. If you or your opponent each bound a card with this effect, put this card into your soul. So more binding cards. And I think I forgot to mention this, is that almost all of the binding your opponent's card is targeted towards the rearguard circle. So rearguards that do have resist is still affected by all of this binding, which is really good. Unless there's a skill saying that that rearguard circle is no longer a rearguard circle, then sure, those rearguards are safe from the binding. But up until now, this card and the rest of the binding opponent's card can affect whatever rearguards, since it's targeting the rearguard circle. It's a different stuff. You get the point. So of course, the grade 1 Koumaaun will be the best target to be bind with this card, and since all of the cards bind by this order card goes back to hand, means that you are able to use Koumaaun the next turn, which is actually very nice. And not only that, if you and your opponent does bind a card, it goes to soul, which provides the much needed soul resources that this deck might be lacking. Unless of course your opponent do not have any rearguards, then, you know, this card does not go to soul, which is a bummer. But then again, at least for now, there should be like 1 or 2 rearguards. But overall, I think this probably is one of the most important order card that Shojodoji will want to run in their deck. Last but not least is Explosive Dragon Cramstego. Not a stealth unit, keep in mind. Auto rearguard circle. When this unit attacks, cost Soul Blast 1, your opponent choose 3 cards from their drop and bind them. If 3 cards were not bound, this unit gets 10k power until the end of that battle. Well, this card not necessarily is like, you know, a Shojodoji Doji specific card. It's more like, you know, a very, you know, generic card that is conveniently supporting Shojodoji. This card does help bind some of the cards that is in the drop zone for your opponent to the bind zone, which is very, very nice. However, this also does, you know, somewhat hinders the playstyle a little bit, or maybe the timing is like very awkward, because most of the time your opponent will have more than 3 in the drop zone. Because this is a grade 3, you can only call this during your 3rd turn. So they might have a lot of drop, or they, you know, don't have any drop. It's either one of those. But then again, this card does help you get cards to the bind zone should you actually need it. If not, then, you know, this card can just be discarded away. This card, I think, will not get the 10k power in the mid to late game, because in the mid to late game, usually the drop zone will be stacked with a lot of cards already. So even binding 3, I don't think is gonna be enough to, you know, bind everything to get the 10k. So it's an okay card to tag in. It's not really necessary to put this card in. It costs a soul as well. Very, very sad. However, what you didn't realize is that the cards that were bind by this effect is actually permanent. It does not state go put those cards back to hand. You straight up bind it from their drop zone. This is potentially quite detrimental to certain matchups. But then again, your opponent will be choosing those 3 cards from the drop. Keep in mind here is that this bind is actually permanent. So do keep that in mind. Do whatever you must with that information. And that is all for this new right line. It is an interesting right line to be introduced in, you know, D series, because this right line is one of those right line that requires you to basically brainstorm heavily before you can perform well with this right line. It's not necessarily weak, it just requires a lot of thinking for you to succeed with this right line. But with that being said, I still think this has a shot of being meta. Well, eventually. Do like and subscribe if you like this video, and of course during the bell notification icon so that you don't miss a video I upload. With that being said, I'll see you all on the field.